The Samu incident, or Battle of Samu, was a large cross-border assault on the 13th of November 1966 by Israeli military on the Jordanian-controlled West Bank village of Samu in response to an Al-Fatah landmine attack 2 days earlier near the West Bank border, which killed 3 Israeli soldiers on a border patrol, or on a border patrol. No, I was sorry. It purportedly originated from Jordanian territory. It was the largest Israeli military operation since the 1956 Suez crisis, and it is considered to have been a contributing factor to the outbreak of the Six-Day War. Since 1965, Jordan had an active campaign to curb Fatah sabotage activities. The handling of the incident was widely criticized in Israeli political and military circles, and the United Nations responded with the United Nations Security Council Resolution 228 censuring Israel. All right. For violating the United Nations Charter and the General Armistice Agreement. For 3 years, King Hussein of Jordan had been meeting clandestinely with Israeli Foreign Minister Golda Meir, right? And Prime Minister's deputy, Abba Eban, concerning peace and mutually secure borders. Hussein later stated that during one of his meetings with Israeli representatives, I told them I could not absorb a serious retaliatory raid, and they accepted the logic of this and promised there would never be one. On the night of the 11th of November, an Israeli border patrol vehicle carrying policemen drove over a mine near the Israeli-Jordanian border, killing 3 and wounding 6. The mine was reportedly planted by Al-Fatah men, formerly the Palestinian National Liberation Movement. On the 12th of November, King Hussein sent a letter of condolence to Israeli Prime Minister Levi Eshkol via the U.S. Embassy in Amman. From there, it was sent to U.S. Ambassador Walworth Barbour at the Embassy of Tel Aviv. Instead of forwarding it to the Prime Minister, he left the letter on his desk, assuming it was not important and there was no rush. According to another version of the story, the letter reached Barbour on the 11th, a Friday, but he delayed passing it on due to the coming Sabbath. Early in the morning of the 13th of November, King Hussein received an unsolicited message from his Israeli contact stating that Israel had no intention of attacking Jordan. Early the same day also, the Israeli military mobilized 3,000 to 4,000 troops and sent about 600 of these with 60 half-tracks and 11 tanks across the border into the Jordanian-controlled West Bank. Israel's rationale for the cross-border assault was to avenge the 3 Israeli deaths in a landmine incident on the 12th of November 1966, based on the Israeli allegation that the attack had originated from Jordan. A further goal in the operation was to demolish houses in Palestinian villages located south of Hebron as a show of force to preempt further Palestinian violence. The Israeli rationale for the attack on Samu has often been questioned. For example, Colonel Jan Muren, a Dutch UN observer in the West Bank who patrolled Samu during this period, gave an interview to the Dutch current affairs program Nova on the 40th anniversary of the Six-Day War, where he denied the Israeli charges regarding Samu. He said, had the people from this village anything to do with the attack on Israel? Well, no. Not just from this village, but also not from the entire West Bank. Only Western officers operated here, and we did patrols. Only Western officers operated here, and we did patrols. The situation was completely calm. However, the attack against the Israeli patrol had occurred 2 days earlier. Although the purported Jordanian origin of the perpetrators was never independently investigated, Jordan immediately lodged a formal complaint with the UN Security Council. Although the Israeli goal was retribution for the Fatah landmine incident, purportedly having originated from Jordanian-controlled territory, Israel's first act was to cross the 1949 armistice line and to destroy a Jordanian police post at Rujm El Madfa. In addition to the large-scale destruction in Samu village, the Israeli forces also damaged other villages. In a report by the Arab League, it was assumed that the main goal of this attack was to test the efficiency of what was called the United Arab Command, and see if any other Arab countries, such as Egypt or Syria, would come to the aid of Jordan. The report also assumes that this battle was in preparation for the Six-Day War. Let's see. This is the actual mobilization of the force. Curious what the overall number of casualties or fatalities or property destruction was. Reports of the total number of houses destroyed range from 40 to 125. The IDF estimates 40. The UN estimates 125. The UN also reported the destruction of a village medical clinic, a 6-classroom school, and a workshop, plus damage to 1 mosque and 28 houses. Wow, says Stephen, thanks for gifting 5 subs. 40th Battalion, Infantry Battalion of the Jordanian Army, commanded by Major Assad Ganma, encountered the Israeli forces northwest of Samu. Eight Jordanian Hawker Hunter jets were scrambled at Mafrag Air Base and attacked Israeli forces to relieve pressure on their own troops, but were met by a force of 4 Israeli Mirage 3 jets. In the air battle that followed, a Jordanian plane was shot down and the pilot was killed, and an Israeli plane was damaged and forced to land. Its pilot was severely injured. And a platoon of Jordanian during the battle. During the battle, 16 Jordanian military personnel, 15 soldiers, 1 pilot were killed, and 54 other soldiers are wounded. 1 Israeli soldier was killed. Colonel Yahuv Shaham, the commander of the Israeli paratrooper battalion. 10 other Israeli soldiers were wounded. 3 local civilians were killed. Jordan, following the battle, King Hussein was faced with a storm of criticism for failing to protect Samu, emanating from Jordanians as well as from Palestinians and neighboring Arab countries. Riots spread throughout the West Bank, demanding the king be overthrown. 4 Palestinians were killed by Jordanian police as a result of the riots. On November 20th, Hussein ordered nationwide military service. I guess this is probably one of the things that probably pressured him into taking action during the Six-Day War then. Egyptian and Syrian radio also verbally attacked Jordan, accusing King Hussein of collaborating with the CIA to plot an overthrow of the Ba'ath Party in Syria. Following the Palestinian demonstrations against him, King Hussein accused Nasser of using the presence of the UNEF on Egypt's border with Israel as an excuse for failing to take action against Israel. The Palestinians rioted in Hebron, Nablus, and Jerusalem on the West Bank, and Irbid in Jordan. The Palestinian Liberation Organization warned all Jordanian ministers to resign by noon on the 26th of November. In Israel, angered opposition parties demanded to know why Israel attacked Jordan rather than Syria, which was the guerrilla home base. And a special, I don't know anything about that. Syria was the guerrilla home base. I've read about like scattered attacks or random attacks, but I don't know anything about guerrilla home base. I'm assuming that's in reference to what? Palestinian attacks or Fedayeen attacks or... In a special parliamentary debate, Prime Minister Eshkol listed 14 major acts of sabotage carried out from Jordan in the past year, climaxed by the landmine explosion that killed 3 Israeli troops on the 12th of November. Eshkol said, "It is regrettable that this particular act of aggression came from Jordan, but since it did, he had picked Jordan as his target. No country where the saboteurs find shelter and through whose territory they pass on their way to Israel can be exempt from responsibility." What Eshkol left unsaid was his certainty that, with the so-called Arab unity being what it was, Jordan would find itself with far less Arab support than Syria, which is much closer to Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. Jordan's Arab partners did wait until the Israelis had withdrawn before making indignant vows of support. Nice. What did the Palestinians do during that time? Did they try building a country or something? We haven't gotten far enough yet, but I don't believe Palestinians up to this point in history, through 1967, I don't think Palestinians have been trying to build their country. They've been trying to kick out the Israelis because they consider that land to be their country. The catch right now is for Palestinians to establish a country would mean that they would have to establish borders, which would mean they would have to recognize Israel as a country. So that's something none of these people want to do yet. So they can't really establish a country because they don't want to recognize Israel as existing, right? Because then that would basically be ceding all of the territory to Israel by saying, oh, okay, fine, you can have it, you know? Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser. Jordan's Arab partners did wait until the Israelis had withdrawn before acting like they were tough shit. 2 days after the attack, in a memo to President Johnson, his special assistant Walt Rostow wrote, "I'm not suggesting our usual admonition against retaliation." Admonition, I think, right? To admonish. We'll maintain that posture, but retaliation is not the point in this case. This 3,000-man raid with tanks and planes was out of all proportion to the provocation and was aimed at the wrong target. And hitting Jordan so hard, the Israelis have done a great deal of damage to our interests and to their own. Hold on, I'm going to just sneeze. Never mind, no I don't. They've wrecked a good system of tacit cooperation between Hussein and the Israelis. They've undercut Hussein. We've spent $500 million to shore him up as a stabilizing factor on Israel's longest border, and vis-a-vis Syria and Iraq. One thing that we haven't read at all about, somebody emailed me this. I hope I don't have to like read on the history of every single surrounding Arab country, but we've dipped our toes into this a little bit. But apparently, even though the British kind of like abandoned the historic Palestinian area, apparently they had been making great investments into Jordan the entire time. That was like their child, supposedly. I think that's why they got, oh God, what was the name of the guy? Was it Scrub? What was the name of the British military leader, I think, that got kicked out after they lost? Was it the First War? What was the last name of the British military commander that was in charge of the Jordanian forces? It was like Scrub or Shrub or, what am I thinking of? Somebody here, who was paying attention? He had a last name like this. Nobody knows. Nobody was paying attention. The whole class gets failed. Was it Scrum? No. Glub. That was the name of the guy. Good job, Vyaza, or whatever. Oh, fuck, I didn't write him down here. Hold on, I'm trying to figure out which war did he get kicked out of? Glub Pasha. It was either after the first or the second war. I think Jordan ejected him. 56. Or it might have been the Suez Crisis, maybe. During the First World War, he served in France. Okay, hold on, let me check here. And I think this really pissed off the British people. I think. Autobiography legacy. Wait, where were we? Glub remained in charge of the defense of the West Bank following the Armistice of 49. He retained command of the Arab Legion until 56, when King Hussein dismissed him and several other British senior officials in the Arab Legion. Hussein wanted to distance himself from the British and to disprove the contention of Arab nationalists that Glub was the actual ruler of Jordan. Differences between Glub and Hussein had been apparent since 52, especially over defense arrangements. Keeping in mind the Samu incident took place in 65? When was this? 66. Okay. 66, and he was gone in. Oh, he was gone way before this. Okay, 50, because he was gone way before the 60 war. I'm trying to think of what got him kicked out. Oh, it was Suez. If it was 56, that would have been the Suez Crisis, right? Although that's early in the year, isn't it? Because the Suez Crisis didn't happen until October. Why did he get kicked out again? Hold on. Dismissed him and several other British senior officials. Let me see if we can find this again. He spent the remainder of his life writing books. Loser. The Arabization of the Jordanian army saw the dismissal of senior British officers commanding the Arab Legion by King Hussein. Glub Pasha got kicked the fuck out. The British government initially responded furiously, but chose not to take further action against Jordan after they realized Hussein's decision did not mean abandoning the British as an ally. The Jordanian streets which witnessed large celebrations. Pressure Britain exerted on Jordan during the Baghdad Pact in 55 caused a spike in anti-British sentiment. The royal decree to dismiss all British officers and personally delivered it to the then Prime Minister Samir al-Rifai. Rifai? Okay. I remember reading about the dismissal, but maybe there wasn't necessarily like a super specific inciting event or war that caused it. Okay. Have you gotten to Nasir's resignation? Not yet, but I think, doesn't that come after the 6-Day War? I think he resigns, but then I think he comes back or something, right? Do you plan on talking to Lonerbox after you're done with the research? Yeah, I will, yeah. Okay. They've set progress back toward a long-term accommodation with the Arabs. This may have persuaded the Syrians that Israel didn't dare attack Soviet-protected Syria, but could attack US-backed Jordan with impunity. It's important that we strengthen the hand of those within the Israeli government who feel this is not the proper way to handle the problem. Even members of the Israeli military now doubt that retaliation will stop the cross-border raids, though they see no better solution. UN Security Council convened to hear the Jordanian complaint and invited an Israeli response. After hearing both sides, the UK representative responded, "My delegation can find no justification whatsoever for the calculated, admitted, and wholly disproportionate act of military reprisal committed by Israel against Jordan on the 13th of November. Mr. President, reference has been made in the letter of the representative of Israel to you of the 12th of November to a mining incident on that day which cost the lives of 3 occupants Oh, mining incident. I'm sorry. I thought he was trying to say, oh, you guys were just mining now, but he means a mine, right? Okay. Certainly, my delegation deplores that incident and regrets the loss of life, but even if it could be demonstrated to us that Jordan had any direct responsibility for this and other incidents, we could not possibly condone the Israel attack. It was a fully planned attack mounted by infantry and armored forces and supported by aircraft, an attack on Jordanian villages in the area of Hebron. Hebron is a town south of Jerusalem, right? Let me just get these on my brain more. Hebron in the West Bank. It is south, farther south than I thought. Okay. So it's Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and then Hebron is quite a bit far south. Okay. Is there like any natural terrain here? You see like where the West Bank is, like kind of encroaches in here and everything? There's not like, these aren't like mountains or hills or whatever that make this natural, is it? Or is it just like an arbitrary border? Because the layout looks very weird, unless there's like, and like, oh, there are? Okay. Because oh wait, can I do like, terrain? Oh, are there? Kind of, I guess, maybe? Pull up the elevation layer. Is that what I'm on right now? Would it be terrain or... The valley is the green part. Thanks, Chief. I thought the green part was just where a bunch of artists dumped a bunch of paint. Gotcha. Okay. In the original UN... Oh, never mind, okay. I was thinking in the original UN partition plan, who got Jerusalem, but that was the internationally administered area. Trinarchs, no, I have not read any other specialty papers. I'll read it when I am current on the history, okay? I love you. Okay. I don't think there's anything else I need to do about this. So basically, 3 Israeli soldiers died from a mine while they were patrolling the Jordanian Israeli border on the West Bank, and then Israel did an unhinged incursion into the West Bank and leveled anywhere from 40 to 125 houses, probably closer to the 125 number than the 40 number, considering the 125 number was the UN estimate. Oh, okay. Okay, let's get back into all of this shit, okay? Because we haven't done any of our history reading today. We were finishing reading about like the 6-Day War. We'd read about the Jordanian front, where Israel captured the West Bank. We read about the Egyptian front, where Israel captured the Sinai Peninsula. And now we have to read about the Syrian front, where they were fighting in the Golan Heights. Okay, Golan Heights. Golan Heights. What the fuck are these? Golan is a region of the Levant spanning 1,800 kilometers squared. Destiny, this one. Okay. Okay. Oh, okay. This is the Golan Heights. This is an easier to see thing. Okay. In May to June of 1967, in preparation for conflict, the Israeli government planned to confine the confrontation to the Egyptian front, whilst taking into account the possibility of some fighting on the Syrian front. Syria largely stayed out of the conflict for the first 4 days. False Egyptian reports of a crushing victory against the Israeli army and forecasts that Egyptian forces would soon be attacking Tel Aviv influenced Syria's decision to enter the war in a sporadic manner during this period. So Syria entered the war on the assumption that Israel was losing dramatically to Egyptian forces. There's a lot of bad intel in this area, Jesus. Syrian artillery began shelling northern Israel, and 12 Syrian jets attacked Israel settlements in the Galilee. Where is this region also? We hear about this a lot. It's somewhere in this northern... Okay, Upper Galilee, Lower Galilee. Okay, and then Golan Heights are over here. Sea of Galilee is over here. Lebanon is as part of Upper Galilee. Oh, okay, all right. Israeli fighter jets intercepted the Syrian aircraft, shooting down 3 and driving off the rest. In addition to Lebanese Hawker Hunter jets, 2 of the 12 Lebanon had crossed into Israeli airspace and began strafing Israeli positions in the Galilee. They were intercepted by Israeli fighter jets, and 1 was shot down. On the evening of the 5th of June, the Israeli Air Force attacked Syrian airfields. The Destiny, look at the height map.
Good morning, everybody. I want to welcome you to marklang10.com, where we make Israel often non-talked about subjects. Okay.
Golan Heights is up here, right?
Which is airspace.
Oh, I see. Okay. Golan Heights is this part up here, northeast of the Sea of Galilee, and then this is Upper and Lower Galilee. Oh, scroll down. Is there an actual map? Oh, okay. I see. Okay, so these are big hills right here. I'm guessing artillery here. Do you think, can artillery here shoot into Tel Aviv? What is your like range here? How far can artillery strike from Golan Heights? Every 30 seconds, Israeli artillery goes in action against a barely visible target somewhere in the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip. Oh, fuck. This is all going to be recent, huh? People are saying 25 to 40 mile range today. Back then, 5 to 10 miles. That's a rage pope. I don't know if that's true or not, but okay. Intercepted by Israeli fighter jets, 1 was shot down. Okay, the Syrian Air Force lost some 32 MiG-21s, 23 MiG-15s, and MiG-17 fighters, and 2 Ilyushin Tu-28 bombers, 2/3 of fighting strength. Oh. On the evening of the 5th of June, the Israeli Air Force attacked Syrian airfields. Jesus. So they attacked Egyptian airfields and Syrian airfields on the same day? Okay. The Syrian Air Force lost almost, it seems like a lot of shit, 2/3 of its fighting strength, so almost everything. The Syrian aircraft that survived the attack retreated to distant bases and played no further role in the war. Following the attack, Syria realized that the news it had received from Egypt of the near total destruction of the Israeli military could not have been true. Oh. False Egyptian reports weren't bad intel. This was when Egypt was lying. But I think Nasser said the same thing to the Jordanian king as well, right? Didn't he tell him, like, look at the planes flying back, that's us? But it was actually the Israeli bombers coming back, or fighters coming back after having destroyed all of their airfields. Because yeah. Nasser exaggerated / lied about Egyptian victory. The Syrian aircraft that's run, okay. On the 6th of June, a minor Syrian force tried to capture the water plants at Tel Dan, the subject of a fierce escalation 2 years earlier. Dan? And Shiar Yashuv. These attacks were repulsed with the loss of 20 soldiers and 7 tanks. An Israeli officer was also killed, but a broader Syrian offensive quickly failed. Syrian reserve units were broken up by Israeli air attacks, and several tanks were reported to have sunk into the Jordan River. Other problems included tanks being too wide for bridges, lack of radio communications between tanks and infantry, and units ignoring orders to advance. The post-war Syrian army report concluded, our forces did not go into the offensive either because they did not arrive or were not wholly prepared, or because they could not find shelter from the enemy's aircraft. The reserves could not withstand the air attacks. They dispersed after the morale plummeted. The Syrians bombarded Israeli civilian settlements in the Galilee Panhandle with 2 battalions of M46 130mm guns, 4 companies fighting and Duggan Panzer IV tanks. Okay. And the Galilee Panhandle. I wonder what that... Oh, Panhandle up here. Gotcha. The Syrian bombardment killed 2 civilians and 205 houses, as well as farming installations. An inaccurate report from a Syrian officer, however, said that the result of the bombardment, that the enemy appears to have suffered heavy losses and is retreating. Israelis debate whether the Golan Heights should be attacked. On the 7th and 8th of June, the Israeli leadership debated about whether to attack the Golan Heights as well. Syria had supported pre-war raids that had helped raise tensions and had routinely shelled Israel from the heights, so some Israeli leaders wanted to see Syria punished. Military option was that the attack would be extremely costly, since it would entail an uphill battle against a strongly fortified enemy. The western side of the Golan Heights consisted of a rock encarpment that rises 500 meters from the Sea of Galilee and the Jordan River, and then flattens to a gently sloping plateau. Dayan opposed the operation bitterly at first, believing such an undertaking would result in losses of 30,000 and might trigger Soviet intervention. Prime Minister Eshkol, on the other hand, was more open to the possibility, as was the head of the Northern Command, David Elazer, whose unbridled enthusiasm for and confidence in the operation may have eroded Dayan's reluctance. Citation needed. Eventually, the situation on the southern and central fronts cleared up. Intelligence estimated that the likelihood of Soviet intervention had been reduced. Recon showed some Syrian defenses in the Golan region collapsing, and an intercepted cable revealed that Nasir, there is no A there, Nasir was urging the president of Syria to immediately accept a ceasefire. At 3 a.m. on the 9th of June, Syria announced its acceptance of the ceasefire. Despite this announcement, Dayan became more enthusiastic about the idea, and 4 hours later at 7 a.m., gave the order to go into action against Syria without consultation or government authorization. Dayan, after hearing of the Syrian acceptance of a ceasefire, clears an invasion/occupation on his own into the Golan Heights. The Syrian army consisted of about 75,000 men grouped into 9 brigades, supported by an adequate amount of artillery and armor. Israeli forces used in combat consisted of 2 brigades, and in the northern part of the front of Givat Hayim, and another 2... the Golan Heights' unique terrain, mountainous slopes crossed by parallel streams every several kilometers running east to west. And the general lack of roads in the area channel. Thus, the Syrians could move north-south on the plateau itself, and the Israelis could move north-south at the base of the Golan escarpment. An advantage Israel possessed was the excellent intelligence collected by Mossad operative Eli Cohen, who was captured and executed in Syria in 1965, regarding the Syrian battle positions. Syria had built extensive defensive fortifications in depths of up to 15 kilometers. As opposed to all the other campaigns, the Israeli Air Force is only partially effective at the Golan because the fixed fortifications were so effective. However, the Syrian forces proved unable to put up effective defense, largely because the officers were poor leaders and treated their soldiers badly. Often officers would retreat from danger, leaving their men confused and ineffective. The Israelis also had the upper hand during close combat that took place in the numerous Syrian bunkers along the Golan Heights, as they were armed with the Uzi, a submachine gun designed for close combat, while Syrian soldiers were armed with the heavier AK-47 assault rifle designed for combat in more open areas. On the morning of the 9th of June, Israeli jets began carrying out dozens of sorties against Syrian positions from Mount Hermon to Tawfig using rockets salvaged from captured Egyptian stock. Tawfig. How deep into Syria is this? Tawfig, Google Maps. Tawfig, Syria, Google Maps? Let's see if we can find it. Okay, so we have the Sea of Galilee is here. No. Wrong. We need to go way further north. No. Well, I'm sorry, we need to go further south. Okay. Sea of Galilee is here. Okay, Sea of Galilee is here. These are the Golan Heights. Golan. Okay, and we're bombing into Syria. And we're hitting what? How far? How far in? What was this place called? Tawfig and Mount Hermon. Do we see it here? Does anybody see it here? I'm just curious how far in we're hitting. Here's Tafas. Is that even Syria anymore? Oh, yeah, it is. Okay, I'm not gonna be able to find this. I'm just curious, like, how close are we to Damascus? That's all I'm kind of curious about. I don't know. Well, I assume the name has changed since it didn't show up on Google. Yeah, that might be the case. The airstrikes knocked out artillery batteries and storehouses and forced transport columns off the roads. The Syrians suffered heavy casualties and dropped morale, with a number of senior officers and troops deserting. The attacks also provided time as Israeli attacks also provided time as Israeli forces cleared paths through Syrian minefields. However, the airstrikes did not seriously damage the Syrians' bunkers and trench systems, and the bulk of Syrian forces on the Golan remained in their positions. About 2 hours after the airstrikes began. Okay, we don't need every single one of these. Okay. Bro even put health bars. What? Okay, Israeli attack the next day. Throughout the night, the Israelis continued to advance, though it was slowed by fierce resistance. An anticipated Syrian counterattack never materialized. At the fortified village of Jalabina, a garrison of Syrian reservists mainly on empty territories, Syrian forces retreated. During the day, the Israeli units stopped. After obtaining maneuver room between their positions in a line of volcanic hills to the west, in some locations, Israeli troops advanced after an agreed-upon ceasefire to occupy strategically strong positions. To the east, ground terrain is an open, gently sloping plain. Okay. In an effort to pressure the United Nations into enforcing a ceasefire, Damascus Radio undercut its own army by broadcasting the fall of the city of Quneitra 3 hours before it actually capitulated. That premature report of the surrender of the headquarters destroyed the morale of the Syrian troops left in the Golan area. Gotcha. All right, conclusion. By the 10th of June, Israel had completed its final offensive at the Golan Heights, and a ceasefire was signed the day after. Israel seizes the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, right? Both of these were owned by Egypt. The west bank of the Jordan River, including East Jerusalem, from Jordan, and the Golan Heights from Syria. Lemeo, Destiny's not reading the most important part. J. Carroll, wait, are you trying to one guy me? About 1 million Arabs were placed under Israel's direct control in the newly captured territories. Israel's strategic depth grew to at least 300 kilometers in the south, 60 kilometers in the east, and 20 kilometers of extremely rugged terrain in the north. A security asset that would prove useful in the Yom Kippur War 6 years later. Did I pronounce it right? Speaking 3 weeks after the war ended, as he accepted an honorary degree from Hebrew University, Yitzhak Rabin gave his reasoning on the success of Israel. Who was this guy? He was a politician, statesman, and general. He was the 5th prime minister of Israel from 74 to 77 and from 92 until his assassination in 95. Was he one of the generals during this war, or was he just like speaking historically? What were you doing in 1967? Oh, okay. He was the chief of general staff. Okay. Poor. Yom Kippur. Or Yom, yeah, okay, whatever. Our airmen who struck the enemy's planes so accurately that no one in the world understands how it was done, and people seek technological explanations for secret weapons. Our armored troops who beat the enemy even when their equipment was inferior to his. Our soldiers and all other branches who overcame our enemies everywhere despite the latter's superior numbers and fortifications. All these reveal not only coolness and courage in the battle, but an understanding that only their personal stand against the greatest dangers would achieve victory for their country and for their families. And if victory was not theirs, the alternative was annihilation. Wow. Glazing. He's glazing himself. In recognition for contributions, Rabin was given the honor of naming the war for the Israelis. From the suggestions proposed, including the War of Daring, the War of Salvation, and the War of the Sons of Light. Oh, shit. Netanyahu brought this phrase up recently. I guess this has some history in Israel. I don't know what the reference is, but... He chose the least ostentatious, the Six-Day War, evoking the days of creation. I think it's Rabin. Okay, whatever. Dayan's final report on the war to the Israeli General Staff listed several shortcomings in Israel's actions, including misinterpretation of Nasser's intentions, overdependence on the United States, and reluctance to act when Egypt closed the straits. He also credited several factors for Israel's success. Egypt did not appreciate the advantage of striking first, and their adversaries did not accurately gauge Israel's strength and its willingness to use it. What do you think here? What was Israel's overdependence on the United States? Because at this point, the only thing they were getting from us were they were buying weapons and tanks. I'm curious, what part was the overdependence here? $160. Section Aftershocks. Ah, fuck. It's a book. He also credited several factors. Oh, I think we might have did intelligence with them as well. Weren't we reporting on... Did we? I don't remember. Fuck. Dayan's final report to the war. Oh, in Egypt, according to Hikal, Nasser had admitted his responsibility for the military defeat in June of 1967. According to the historian Abd al-Azim Ramadan, Nasser's mistaken decisions to expel the international peacekeeping force from the Sinai Peninsula and close the Straits of Tiran in 1967 led to a state of war with Israel despite Egypt's lack of military preparedness. After the 73 Yom Kippur, or is it Yom Kippur? It's Yom Kippur. It must be Yom Kippur. Fuck it, I don't care. War. Egypt reviewed the cause of its loss in the 67 war. Issues that were identified included the individualistic bureaucratic leadership, promotions on the basis of loyalty, not expertise, and the army's fear of telling Nasser the truth. Lack of intelligence and better Israeli weapons, command, organization, and will to fight. Between casualties, between 776 and 983 Israelis were killed and 4,517 were wounded. Let's do here, casualties. We'll say about 850 Israelis killed, 4,500 wounded. We'll say about 10 to 15K, 10K to 15K Egyptian soldiers killed, 4,338 Egyptian or captured. Jordanian loss are estimated to be 700 killed in action with 200 wounded. 700 Jordanian soldiers killed, 2,500 wounded. Syrians lost between 1K to 2.5K and about 450 captured. Read the paper. It explains why Egypt closed the canal on Israel. Okay. Controversies. Preemptive versus unjustified attack. At the commencement of hostilities, both Egypt and Israel announced that they had been attacked by the other country. The Israeli government later abandoned its initial position, acknowledging Israel had struck first, claiming that it was a preemptive strike in the face of a planned invasion by Egypt. On the other hand, the Arabs view it as unjustified to attack Egypt. Many commentators consider the war as the classic case of anticipatory attack and self-defense. Allegations of atrocities committed against Egyptian soldiers. It's been alleged that Nasser did not want Egypt to learn of the true extent of his defeat, and so ordered the killing of Egyptian army stragglers making their way back to the Suez Canal zone. Oh, I thought this was going to be about Israeli soldiers against Egyptian soldiers. There have also been allegations from both Israeli and Egyptian sources that Israeli troops did kill unarmed Egyptian prisoners. Okay, so there's that too. Allegations of military support from the US, UK, and the Soviet Union. There have been a number of allegations of direct military support of Israel during the war by the US and the UK, including the supplying of equipment despite an embargo and the participation of US forces in the conflict. Many of these allegations and conspiracy theories have been disputed, and it has been claimed that some were given currency in the Arab world to explain the Arab defeat. It has also been claimed that the Soviet Union supported the of its Arab allies, used its naval strength in the Mediterranean as a major threat on the US Navy. American features prominently in Arab conspiracy theories purporting to explain the June 1967 defeat. Mohammed Hassanein Hikal, a confidant of Nasser, claims that President Lyndon B. Johnson was obsessed with Nasser and that Johnson conspired with Israel to bring him down. The reported Israeli troop movement seemed all the more threatening because they were perceived in the context of a U.S. conspiracy against Egypt. Salah Basouini of the Foreign Ministry claims the Foreign Ministry saw the reported Israeli troop movements as credible because Israel had reached the level at which it could find strategic alliance with the United States. During the war, Cairo announced that American and British planes were participating in the Israeli attack. Nasser broke off diplomatic relations following this allegation. Nasser's image of the United States was such that he might well have believed the worst. However, Anwar Sadat implied that Nasser used this deliberate conspiracy in order to accuse the U.S. as a political cover-up for domestic consumption. Lutfi Abd al-Qadir, the director of Radio Cairo during the late 60s, who accompanied Nasser to his visits in Moscow, had his conspiracy theory that both the Soviets and the Western powers wanted to topple Nasser or to reduce his influence. And then there was the USS Liberty incident. This is where a United States Navy electronic intelligence vessel sailing 13 nautical miles off Arish, just outside Egypt's territorial waters, was attacked by Israeli jets and torpedo boats, nearly sinking the ship, killing 34 sailors and wounding 171. Israel said the attack was a case of mistaken identity and that the ship had been misidentified as the Egyptian vessel El Qusir. Israel apologized for the mistake and paid compensation to the victims and their families. In the United States, for damage to the ship, after an investigation, the U.S. accepted the explanation that the incident was friendly fire and the issue was closed by the exchange of diplomatic notes in 1987. Others, however, including the then United States Secretary of State Dean Rusk, chief of naval operations at the time, Admiral Thomas Moore, some survivors of the attack, and intelligence officials familiar with transcripts of intercepted signals on the day have rejected these conclusions as unsatisfactory and maintained that the attack was made in the knowledge that the ship was American. Aftermath. Exodus of Arabs from Israeli-occupied territories. So this is probably, is this before the 67 Arab League Summit? I mean, these probably are occurring around the same time. Well, actually, no, because one could be a response to the other. Let's bring this guy here. This is going to be part of this. The exodus of Arabs from Israeli-occupied territories. There was extensive displacement of populations in the occupied territories of about 1 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, and 280,000 to 325,000 were displaced from their homes. Extensive displacement of population. Displacement means not that they just lost their homes, but that they left the territory completely, right? 1967 Palestinian, we'll say Palestinian exodus. One million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, mostly resettled. No, hold on. In Jordan? Am I reading this correctly? Of about 1 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza, 280,000 to 325,000 were displaced from their homes. Oh, of about. Never mind. It's not 1 million. So it would be 280,000 to 200K to 325K Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza were displaced from their homes. Most of them settled in Jordan, where they contributed to a growing unrest. The other 700,000 remained. Um, 100,000 fled in the Golan Heights. I imagine most went to Syria. Israel allowed only the inhabitants of East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights to receive full Israeli citizenship. Only to those in East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights. In 67 and 81, respectively. (1967), and the Golan Heights would be in 1981. The vast majority of the population of both territories declined to take citizenship. Ooh, okay. Most Palestinians and territories declined to take citizenship. See also Israeli-Palestinian conflict, yeah. Okay. In his book Righteous Victims, Israeli New historian Benny Morris writes, in 3 villages southwest Jerusalem and Kolana, houses were destroyed, not in battle, but as punishment. And in, is this right after the war, I think, or the Six-Day War? And in order to chase away the inhabitants, contrary to government policy, Dayan wrote in his memoirs, and I think we read this, about a third of the homes were razed, about 12,000 inhabitants were evicted, though many then camped out in the environs. The evictees in both areas were allowed to stay and later were given cement and tools by the Israeli authorities to rebuild at least some of their dwellings. But many thousands of other Palestinians now took to the roads. Perhaps as many as 70,000, mostly from the Jericho area, fled during the fighting. Tens of thousands were left over the following months. Altogether, about 1/4 of the population of the West Bank, about 200 to 250,000 people, went into exile. LDT, I used to be really far right. Now I've moved a lot, and even though I don't always agree, I appreciate your sincerity with the stuff you engage in. Wow, thanks, LDT. They simply walked to the Jordan River crossings and made their way on foot to the East Bank. It's unclear how many were intimidated or forced out by Israeli troops and how many left voluntarily in panic and fear. There is some evidence of IDF soldiers going around with loudspeakers, ordering West Bankers to leave their homes and cross the Jordan. Some left because they had relatives or sources of livelihood on the East Bank and feared being permanently cut off. Thousands of Arabs were taken by bus from East Jerusalem to the Allenby Bridge, though there is no evidence of coercion. The Free Israeli The Free Israeli Organized Transportation, which began on June 11th, 1967, went on for about a month. At the bridge, they had to sign a document stating that they were leaving of their own free will. Perhaps as many as 70,000 people emigrated from the Gaza Strip to Egypt and elsewhere in the Arab world. On July 2nd, the Israeli government announced that it would allow the return of those 1967 refugees who desired to do so, but no later than August 10th. Later extended to September 13th, the Jordanian authorities probably pressured many of the refugees, who constituted an enormous burden, to sign up to return. In practice, only 14,000 of the 120,000 who applied were allowed by Israel back into the West Bank by the beginning of September. After that, only a trickle of special cases were allowed back, perhaps 3,000 in all. In addition, between 80 to 110,000 or 110,000 Syrians fled the Golan Heights, of which about 20,000 were from the city of Kenitra. According to most recent research by the Israeli daily Haaretz, a total of 130,000 Syrian inhabitants fled or were expelled from the territory, most of them pushed out by the Israeli army. Israel and Zionism. Following the war, Israel experienced a wave of national euphoria, and the press praised the military's performance for weeks afterwards. New victory coins were minted to celebrate. In addition, the world's interest in Israel grew, and the country's economy, which had been in crisis before the war, flourished due to an influx of tourists and donations, as well as the extraction of oil from the Sinai's wells. The aftermath of the war also saw a baby boom, which lasted for 4 years. Um, The aftermath of the war is also of religious significance. Under Jordanian rule, Jews were expelled from Jerusalem and were effectively barred from visiting the Western Wall, despite Article 8 of the 1949 Armistice Agreement, which required making arrangements for Israeli Jewish access to the Western Wall. Jewish holy sites were not maintained, and Jewish cemeteries had been desecrated. After the annexation to Israel, each religious group was granted administration over its holy sites. For the first time since 1948, Jews could visit the Old City of Jerusalem and pray at the Western Wall, the holiest site where Jews are permitted to pray, an event celebrated every year during Yom Yerushalayim. Jesus. Despite the Temple Mount, where Al-Aqsa compound is located, being the most important holy site in Jewish tradition, it has been under sole administration of the Jordanian Muslim Waqf. And Jews are barred from praying there, even though they're allowed to visit. In Hebron, Jews gained access to the Cave of the Patriarchs, the second most holy site in Judaism after the Temple Mount, for the first time since the 14th century. Previously, Jews were allowed to pray only at the entrance. Okay, Temple Mount is like where the first temple was built, right? What the fuck is Cave of the Patriarchs? Bro, all this fucking lore. It's a series of caves. According to the Abrahamic religions, the cave and adjoining fields were purchased by Abraham as a burial plot, although most historians believe the Abrahamic, Isaac, Jacob narrative to be primarily mythology. The site is considered a holy place. Over the cave stands a large rectangular. So they think, what, that Abraham was buried here? Or... Who? Cringe. Okay, who cares? All right. Goofy. Okay. Wait, oh my god, I just closed the wrong article. Most notably, the war stirred Zionist passions among Jews in the Soviet Union, who had by that time been forcibly assimilated. Many Soviet Jews subsequently applied for exit visas and began protesting for their right to immigrate to Israel. Following diplomatic pressure from the West, the Soviet government began granting exit visas to Jews in growing numbers. From 1970 to 1988, some 291,000 Soviet Jews were granted exit visas, of whom 165,000 immigrated to Israel and 126,000 immigrated to the US. The great rise in Jewish pride in the wake of Israel's victory also fueled the beginnings of the Baal Teshuvah movement. Is a description of the return of secular Jews to religious Judaism. Losers. The return of secular Jews to religious Judaism. Oh, gotcha. The war gave impetus to a campaign in which the leader of the Hasidic Lubavitch movement directed his male followers around the world to wear tefillin, small leather boxes, during morning prayers. You wear this? Show me. What? This looks like some fetish gear. Bruv, what? Holy shit. It's to contain his like fucking mind beams. His third eye is hidden behind this box. Jews in Arab countries. In the Arab nations, populations of minority Jews faced persecution and expulsion following the Israeli victory, contributing to the Jewish exodus from Arab lands, which had been ongoing since 1948. Okay, so conclusions. We've got Jews immigrating en masse out of the Soviet Union, and Jews exodizing, is that okay? And Jews leaving en masse from Arab countries. Continued from 1948, because I think they'd already been after the first Arab-Israeli war. Mobs attacked Jewish neighborhoods in Egypt, Yemen, Lebanon, Tunisia, and Morocco, burning synagogues and assaulting residents. A pogrom in Tripoli, Libya, left 18 Jews dead and 25 injured. The survivors were herded into detention centers. Of Egypt's 4,000 Jews, 800 were arrested, including the chief rabbis of both Cairo and Alexandria, and their property sequestered by the government. The ancient communities of Damascus and Baghdad were placed under house arrest, their leaders imprisoned and fined. A total of 7,000 Jews were expelled, many with merely a satchel. Okay. Anti-Semitism in communist countries. Following the war, a series of anti-Semitic purges began in communist countries. Some 11,200 Jews from Poland immigrated to Israel during the 1968 Polish political crisis in the following years. Okay, Jewish countries en masse of the Soviet Union, Jews leaving en masse, and Jews leaving en masse from other communist countries, I guess. War of attrition. Following the war, Egypt initiated clashes along the Suez Canal and what became known as the War of Attrition. Involved fighting between Israel and Egypt, Jordan, and Palestine Liberation Organization. Fuck. Do I need to... Is this something we should read about? Did any land trade hands here, or was it just various historians have commented on the war with differing opinions? Chaim Herzog notes that Israel withstood the battle and adapted itself into a hitherto alien type of warfare. Ziv Sheaf notes that although Israel suffered losses, she was able to preserve her military accomplishments in '67, and that despite increased Soviet involvement, Israel had stood firm. Simone Dunstan wrote that Israel was successfully continuing to hold the Bar-Lev line and forcing the Egyptians to come to the negotiating table. However, the war had sapped Israeli morale. However, he claimed that the war's conclusion led to a dangerous complacency within the Israeli high command about the resolve of the Egyptian armed forces and the strength of the Bar-Lev line. Wow, Beanpod, thanks for gifting 5 memberships. So the Egyptians saw the war as a great victory in spite of their heavy casualties and the mauling their air defenses had sustained, becoming confident in their ability to counter Israelis' air power. Gideon Remez and Isabella Ginor consider the war to have been a defeat for Israel, arguing that Israel was compelled to accept the ceasefire because Soviet air defenses were downing Israel's F-4 Phantoms at an unsustainable rate. They argued that Egypt's blatant violation of the ceasefire by moving SAM batteries into the Canal Zone after the war's end without response was a sign of Israel's failure. They consider the lopsided Israeli victory over the Soviets and Operation Riemann 20 as having enabled Israel to accept the ceasefire without losing face. The battle and illustrious tactical exploits by Israeli ground troops being used to claim victory. My family is Jewish and came from Dagestan, and this is terrifying. Protesters here are passionate about free Palestine and ignore these things. Okay. They won back the Sinai? Wait, did they really? I thought they didn't get back the Sinai until the Yom Kippur War. Howard Sacker notes that Israel accepted the ceasefire because it was clear that the war was developing into a Soviet-Israeli confrontation. The Israeli military had taken significant casualties because the United States offered additional sales of F-4 Phantoms to induce Israel into accepting it, while Egypt accepted it because it was desperate for a break in the wake of its heavy casualties and the near depopulation of the cities in the Canal Zone. After Egypt violated the ceasefire movement of SAM batteries, the United States offered additional F-4 Phantoms after Israel considered retaliation, although the ceasefire set to last 3 months. I'm curious what the extent of I'm curious what the extent of U.S.-Soviet involvement was on both sides. That's something I'm kind of curious about. Israeli military historian Yaniv claimed that Israel's aggressive policy in direct striking Soviet troops was a success. Were there Soviet troops there? And that it helped the Soviets to push for a ceasefire. The Russians understood well that the conflict is not worth it. Humiliations, loss of prestige, and the understanding that just because Israel is currently revealing to the world that it shoots down Russians doesn't mean that it will always keep quiet. Soviet forces are known to have sustained significant losses. One Russian veterans website compiled an admittedly incomplete list of 58 dead, including victims of accidents and disease. In August of 1970, the French newspaper Le Figaro reported that 100 Soviet military personnel have been killed in Egypt over the past year. 5 Soviet MiG-21 aircraft were shot down in aerial combat. The PLO suffered 1,828 killed and 2,500 captured. Fuck. We should have this. 1967 to 1970, War of Attrition. Okay, so this was ongoing border conflict between Israel and Egypt, Jordan, and the PLO. and their allies. We can just be brief. No territorial changes during this time. Oh, and then this was right after the 67 Arab League Summit. Characterized by large-scale shelling across the Suez Canal, extensive area warfare, and commando raids, hostilities continued in August 1970 ended with a ceasefire. Okay. On the Egyptian front, we've got missile boats, we've got planes, we've got artillery. We've got Israel sending planes back. International community is trying to find a diplomatic solution to the conflict. The jarring mission of the UN was supposed to ensure that the terms of the UN Security Council Resolution 242 would be observed, but by late 1970, it was clear that this mission had been a failure. Fearing the escalation of the conflict into an East versus West confrontation during the tensions amid the Cold War, the American president, Richard Nixon, sent his Secretary of State, William Rogers, to formulate the Rogers Plan in 1970. Cuban Missile Crisis was in the 80s, right? Cuban Missile Crisis Wikipedia. Wait, did I just say 80s or 60s? It was definitely not the 80s. I meant 60s. It was before the Six-Day War. I don't remember if I just said 60s or 80s. Okay, so this was prior to this. Okay. In August 1970, Israel, Jordan, and Egypt agreed to an in-place ceasefire plan. Okay, so I'm curious what are global tensions like as this kind of conflict is breaking out. I guess global tension would have been high during the Six-Day War because that was immediately following the Cuban Missile Crisis as well, right? In August 1970, okay, we got the Rogers Plan. August of 1970, Israel, Jordan, and Egypt agreed to an in-place ceasefire under the Rogers Plan. Though Egyptians and Soviet allies rekindled conflict by violated the agreement. Shortly thereafter, moving their missiles near the Suez Canal and constructed the largest anti-aircraft system yet implemented at that point in history. The Israelis responded with a policy which their Prime Minister Golda Meir dubbed asymmetrical response, where an Israel retaliation was disproportionately large in comparison to any Egyptian attacks. To be fair, I'm pretty sure Israel was already kind of on this asymmetrical response before this, but, well, I guess, yeah. Following Nasser's death in 1970, his successor Anwar al-Sadat continued the ceasefire with Israel, focusing on rebuilding the Egyptian army and planning a full-scale attack on the Israeli forces controlling the eastern bank of the Suez Canal. These plans would materialize 3 years later in the Yom Kippur War. Ultimately, Israel would return Sinai to Egypt after the two nations signed a peace treaty in 1979. When Israel is controlling the Suez Canal during this time, is Israel blockading or preventing the movement of any ships through these areas? Are they trying to close down or control what's passing through, or are they letting everything through? Hey, Dustin, what program are you using to write research about Oh, it's called Obsidian. I feel like if they were, I think I would hear about it, or it feels like they would write it in here. What about Operation Ramon 20? Yeah, what is this shit that was happening? It was the code name of an area battle in 1970, which pitted the Israeli Air Force directly against Soviet fighter pilots stationed in Egypt during the War of Attrition. Israel planned the dogfight in order to send a message that it would no longer tolerate direct Soviet military involvement in its conflict with Egypt. Ooh, okay. Israel engaged in an air battle, Ramon 20, to directly target Soviet fighter pilots to drive them away, the USSR from the conflict. The afternoon of July 30th, 1974, Israeli Mirage 3s crossed into Egyptian airspace, flying in tight formation so as to appear as a single aircraft. As expected, 4 Soviet-flown MiG-21s were scrambled to intercept what they believed to be a routine Israeli recon flight. They were soon joined by an additional 8 MiGs. As the Soviet fighters closed in on the Mirages, they were ambushed by 4 Israeli F-4 Phantoms and 8 Mirage 8s, which had been lurking undetected at low altitude. Can somebody explain how these air battles are working? Do you just, like, when you fly out, are you just assuming that there's, like, no low altitude planes? Like, this seems like a big, like, bug that, like, hasn't been patched from, like, air PvP. Like, what's going on here? If you just, like, fly planes, like, low, do you just, like, auto win fights because you can just hide everything? Or... An additional 12 MiG-21 reinforcements soon arrived. By the end of the close quarters dogfight, 5 Soviet MiG-21s had been downed with no Israeli losses. Rage Pope, I thank you for restating what I just said. I understand that radar can't see. I understand that. I don't know why you're just, like, restating more or less what I just said, but thank you. By the end of the close quarters dogfight, Egyptian military leaders were pleased with the outcome of the battle because the Soviets had long been criticizing Egypt's aerial... Egyptian military leaders were pleased with the outcome of the battle because the Soviets had long been criticizing Egypt's aerial losses to Israel and attributing them to lack of skill among Egyptian fighter pilots. The Soviets kept quiet about the incident so as to avoid the embarrassment of their defeat. It was one of the final engagements of the War of Attrition and is widely believed to have contributed to its conclusion. Okay, interesting. Both Israeli government and Air Force had by now realized that the policy of restraint versus the Soviets had failed. For the first time, Israel's hard-won aerial supremacy was under a serious threat, not only on the west bank of the Suez Canal, but over Israeli-controlled territory as well. The Israeli Air Force therefore proposed to take the Soviets head-on, hoping to demonstrate that although it possessed no operational answer to the extensive air defense array forming on the west bank of the Suez Canal, it was nevertheless superior in the air. The opportunity to punish the Soviets would also serve to boost flagging morale, followed by the loss of several aircraft and airmen in the previous months. It would also prove valuable in upcoming ceasefire negotiations. IEF Chief of Staff Mordecai Hod, backed by IDF Chief of the General Staff Haim Bar-Lev, took his case to the Israeli cabinet on July 25th. Once the approval of Golda Meir's government had been received, the IAF then set about organizing a planned team ambush. Such ambush has been carried out before under the codename Ramon, and an existing plan was now brought up to date and designated Ramon 20. Okay. Okay, I'm curious what happened. What is the Palestine Liberation Organization? Oh. Wait, did I exit out of the War of Attrition? It was the past one. Palestine Liberation Organization. Wait, how is there nothing about their involvement in the War of Attrition? Israel assumed the Jordanians would ignore the invasion, but the latter fought alongside the Palestinians and opened heavy fire that inflicted loss upon Israeli forces. This engagement marked the first known deployment of suicide bombers by Palestinian forces. Okay. (1968) Palestinian PLO. The PLO, right? The PLO deploys suicide bombers for the first time. Damn, imagine being like the first suicide bombers. Yikes. The goal of the invasion was to destroy Karmagal camp and capture Yasser Arafat in reprisal for the attacks by the PLO against Israeli civilians, which culminated in an Israeli school bus hitting a mine in the Negev. However, plan staffers prepared in 1967, 1 year before the bus incident. When Jordan saw the size of the raiding forces entering the battle, it was led to the assumption that Israel had another goal of capturing Balka Governorate to create a situation similar to Golan Heights. Israel assumed that the Jordanian army would ignore the invasion, but the latter fought aside the Palestinians. Okay. Just stick a pin there. 21 Palestinian guerrillas were killed by Israeli troops in the Jordan Valley. Okay. I don't understand. There's not much information about Palestinian involvement here, but it sounded like at the end, in the casualties, there was like 1,500 PLO members dead. It's strange that that many died and there's like not much written about their activities. The PLO suffered 1,828 killed and 2,500 captured. What were they doing? Where? Nope. Yeah, most likely they were auxiliaries or enlisted in the army of Egypt, Jordan, Syria, possible enterprise. Yeah, maybe, yeah. Okay. I think there's not. Okay, we don't need this much. I think our next thing is probably going to be. I think it's probably the Yom Kippur War. Wait, 74 to 77. No, I think it's before this. Oh, it's. Yeah, it's right here. Okay. Okay, this is our next big boy. Okay.